Thank you everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate your being here. Again, if you're just joining us, please put your name and firm name in the chat with your email address if you'd like a copy of the presentation. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Rich Freeman from Freeman and Partners. Rich has over 20 years of experience consulting with architecture and engineering firms. And today we're going to be discussing business planning. So take it away, Rich.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. I've done a number of these BSA presentations for either the marketing PR group, or this is my first one with your group. And I like to keep them really interactive and informal. So I want to make sure that you kind of get the biggest ROI in terms of your investment of time in listening to this. So I have at least one kind of open brainstorm that I'll do in a little bit to get a sense of some of the challenges that you all are grappling with. As Anne mentioned, so I've worked in and consulted to the AE industry for over 30 years. And our company helps firms craft and implement growth strategies. And that's through business planning, marketing and business development, consulting and training, strategic, executive search, M&A search, and about the only things we don't do is what you do, which is a lot of you do, which is the number crunching and finance and valuation and ownership transition, that type of thing we don't get into. So just a little bit more about me and my background. There's a picture of a tornado, by the way, because I'm from Kansas and I have 2 degrees in atmospheric sciences along with my MBA. And I grew up in Kansas for 19 years, having never seen a tornado, which was a travesty. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, or I should say someone else's hands. And I did my first storm chase in 2011. I'm doing my 5th one in April of 2023. So I finally seen some tornadoes, not that many though. Last year's chase was the most amazing because I was right near my hometown of Wichita and there was a significant tornado outbreak. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a strange background. I told you, about our learning environment. I want it to be informal. I want it to be interactive. Either post questions in the chat or feel free to shout them out and interrupt me. I'm perfectly fine with that. I thought, the title of this is avoiding, ensuring that your business plan is not a dust collector, kind of paraphrasing. And I've been involved in business planning for a long time, and I have a sense of, what are the key components of a plan? How should the process work? And how do you really make like a living, breathing plan that gets acted on and gets revisited rather than just going through the motions? Because a lot of firms in our industry do tend to just go through the motions. So just a little bit of kind of foundation building, historical context. And I'm going to go through these next several slides fairly quickly because they should be a review for you. But if not, let me know. So some people will say, we don't really, or we have a business plan, it's in our head. We don't really need one that's written to share with the organization. And they cite that, our firm has been doing just fine. And I remind everyone what they say in the investment community: past performance is not an indicator of future success. Things are changing around you all the time. The competitive landscape, the client landscape, clients are getting smarter. I do a lot. The other thing I do a lot of is client research, client feedback. So AE firms will hire me to speak to their clients. And they, what I often hear in these interviews is that they view your firm as equally technically qualified as maybe 3, 4, or 5 other firms. So for better or for worse, for some of your clients, your firm looks, smells, and feels the same as a lot of other firms in the industry. So it is a constant challenge to kind of differentiate your firm and also use marketing, market positioning, and BD to do that, business development. So, a couple things regarding business planning, just right off. What are realistic expectations? How do we measure progress? If I can convey one key point today for you to walk away with. It's that it's okay if your plan is not perfect. The goal is to develop a plan, and it may be at 80%, but the incremental ROI to get it from 80 to 100 is just not there. It's supposed to be a living, breathing plan. It's supposed to be course corrected and revisited. But the challenge with some of the people in our industry is, they're waiting for every last bit of data before they codify the plan. And in my experience, it's more important to actually just do it. Just do it, recognizing that it won't be perfect, and then course correct along the way. And most firms will check in on their business plan, the progress of it. It can range from monthly to bi-monthly to quarterly. Although I happen to think quarterly these days is not frequent enough because there's so much happening. And if a quarter goes by without kind of minding your plan, that's a long time, in today's universe. And in terms of how we measure progress, I'm a big believer, as I'm sure you are, given what you do in your backgrounds, of KPIs and other goals in the plan so that you know how to measure progress. And there's a set of marketing KPIs, there's business development KPIs, there can be recruitment and retention KPIs. You all know this. So developing these, whatever you're going to be measuring to assess your progress, is really critical. So this is just kind of foundation building, continuing. I want to be sort of exacting on the language that I'm using, because a lot of people in our industry conflate business planning with marketing and business development planning. And business planning, the way I view a business plan, it's more of a client-centric or client-focused approach or game plan to grow that client sector. And it's comprised of marketing and business development and finance and accounting and HR and IT and project management and delivery. There could be QA, QC. These are all areas of a business plan that's typically focusing on a target client sector. Now, strategic planning, and people conflate these all the time. For me, strategic planning is more of the 25,000 foot level, mission, vision, and core values. And what should emanate from your strategic plan are the business plans, the client-centric business plans that should be aligned and consistent with your mission, vision, where you're headed, and your core values. So you see, if you look at this list here, it kind of goes from 25,000 feet all the way down to the surface, from strategic planning, then developing business plans. And remember, marketing and BD is a component of business of a business plan. And a lot of firms will go through a business planning process, and then once they gather business plans focusing on their key client sectors, the director of marketing, for example, may develop a specific marketing and BD plan that reflects that. So I'm going to pause for a second and take a breath, because I know I went in, full speed. Tell me, what questions do you have? Any questions about anything so far? Even storm chasing, even Kansas, doesn't have to be business planning. And Anne, I'm going to ask you, if you could, to monitor chat and help me out. And James, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, no, I was just, you used a term that I'm not familiar with, KPI.
Oh, I'm sorry, key performance indicator. So it's like a metric, but they're typically more specific to all of the different areas of practice management. You can have KPIs around marketing, BD, project delivery, profitability, et cetera, et cetera. What other questions? Anyone else?
I have a quick one. Can you undertake business planning without having done strategic planning? Or do you do strategic planning first and then business planning?
Well, ideally, you would do strategic planning first, but I have worked with firms. Well, almost everyone says they have a strategic plan. I've delved in and been hired just to do like a business plan for science and technology sector for a particular region. So most people have enough sort of knowledge of their mission, vision, values of the firm that they can go ahead and do a business plan. So yeah, good question. Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, Richard, I have a question on KPIs versus OKRs, objectives and key results. I know KPIs mostly in the marketing realm. I'm curious what your take on the differences and when should you use which?
I honestly, I don't have a take because I don't really use OKRs and I'm not familiar with that terminology.
It's a variation. It's still about measuring results, but it's like what's the objective, and then what are the key results you're expecting from that particular data?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to use KPIs.
Some of KPI. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure, and frankly, other firms may even have other terminology.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me keep going. I love your questions. Definitely keep chiming in. So, in terms of the strategic planning process, now this is strategic planning. You know, in a nutshell, again, even this goes down from 25,000 feet down to the surface. You start with mission and vision. So a mission, which is kind of like, why does our firm exist? That often includes your core values. A vision is more like, what do we want our firm to be at some point in time? What does our firm look like? You know, there can be a 3-year, 5-year. It's interesting that how would I say this? I'm just going to paraphrase. As our world has become more complicated, the windows for vision have decreased. So if you can imagine, it would be really hard to come up with a 10-year vision that's sort of grounded in reality and data and all that. So the planning windows have condensed, and that's been really interesting. And we first saw that in 2008 and 2009 with the recession. Part of the strategic planning process is identifying the issues that your firm has that needs to be addressed. There could be issues in all different areas, as you know. Then developing goals, you know, specific SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, where there's a time deadline for achieving the goal. And then we kind of move into how are we going to achieve the goals through objectives and strategies, and resulting in an action plan, which is much more surface-based. What are we going to do? What are the action items? Who are the responsible parties? And what are the due dates? And then you implement the plan. So honestly, as part of the strategic planning process, you know, a part of your action plan may be to develop business plans or to develop a marketing plan. So that's where that would be founded in this process. So any questions about this? This is kind of and I teach for ACEC Massachusetts Emerging Leaders. I teach their strategic planning and business development session each year. I'm in my 16th year. And this is a graphic that I put up there to get people kind of aligned. So any questions at all about what's on this slide from anyone?
Hey, Richard, I have a question. This is Gerard Georges.
Hi there.
So in the implementation phase of the strategic plan, is there some sort of feedback loop that we should consider to make sure that as we're starting to implement, we're drilling down, that we stay true to the overall mission and vision? Well,
it's a good question. There's one thing I should have mentioned that I think is a little bit in line with your question. So one of the things I should have mentioned is that before you embark on strategic planning And I even also think this for business planning, you don't want to be planning in a vacuum. And it's important to get internal data points vis-a-vis some sort of client feedback, I should say first, internal from your staff, like an employee engagement survey, et cetera, and then external data points vis-a-vis like a client study, a client perception study, that type of a thing. So Gerard, do me a favor. Can you restate your question again? I wanted to throw that in, but I want to make sure I address your question specifically.
Yeah, my question is, once you've laid out the strategic planning and you're engaged in the process and you're down into the implementation phase, is there a process whereby we can either do a feedback loop or checks to see that we're staying in line with the overall mission and vision of the strategic plan?
Well, I mean, the best way to do this is on a regular basis, a regular cadence, whether it's every month, every 2 months, every quarter, is to have a planning update meeting internally. And the PM of the plan, the PM of the strategic plan is your president and CEO. So whoever is the PM and whoever is kind of facilitating these plan check-ins should just ensure that it is consistent with our mission and vision. So honestly, nothing fancy, Gerard, but just actually having that front and center with people and reminding people of it and referring back to it. There's nothing really magic that I would have to add to that. It's more that way. Although, you know, if you all have ideas and you do it differently in some more formal way, that's fine to share. But that's basically what I would recommend, Gerard. Are there any other questions from anyone? Yeah, James.
So I've been a very small practice, like really just like started out just myself 20 years ago, and then have one employee and sometimes two employees in the past. And, you know, I've thought a lot about these issues, and, you know, one of the things that, you know, comes up again and again when I think about trying to grow, and, you know, it's how do you take something that's very personal and kind of, you know, like kind of, you know, and you're thinking about trying to how to grow gradually into a slightly bigger, but you're not trying to become, you know, Gensler or something. So how do these kind of steps translate on a more personal level for a very small firm, I guess is the question, because it seems like you could kind of put on this hat, like I'm a CEO of a firm, which just kind of feels silly when you're at that size.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you could go through all these steps and write them down and feel like you did a business plan. But how does that translate to reality for extremely small business?
Well, James, that's a good question. If I'm you and I'm your size, I don't know if I would go through all of this formal process right now. I don't know you well enough or your practice enough, but if I were talking to you, I would want to just more. Oops. That's okay. That's someone answering your question, James.
Sorry. That's very appropriately. This is my daughter calling from Europe, so I'm going to get off right now.
Okay. All right.
That's the business planning issues that I'm dealing with, right?
Okay. Feel free to follow up or join us later. Okay. All right. So let me keep going. Wow, that saved me from, I guess, answering his question. That was interesting.
I think it is an interesting question though, because there are firms of various sizes, and there is this idea that you go from a small sole practitioner, sole proprietor, one person or two person shop to a bigger shop, and then even bigger, and there are growing pains in the process. I think the only thing that I would say is like whatever regular meeting schedule you have, either with yourself or with the people you work with, adding this kind of conversation, I think is really helpful. And especially around key performance indicators, those measurements that we do, like if you look at utilization or you look at your net billings or whatever targets you're trying to track,
Right.
building it into meetings that you already have, if you already have weekly or monthly meetings with the other principals or partners that you're working with, is, I think, probably the best thing to do.
Thank you, Anne. And, you know, I would add for James and others, you know, I would have a very strategic, targeted response and suggested approach. If, you know, if you're looking to grow, there are a couple specific things that I think are really, really high ROI activities that can jumpstart the growth. And that includes, frankly, it's joining committees, and it is presenting to client-facing groups, and then repackaging your content in the form of abstracts for additional associations, in-house lunch and learns, direct mail, LinkedIn, website. There's so many ways once you develop this content to repackage it. So this is a really important point. If you're small and you're trying to grow your practice, the economic efficiency of speaking to your clients as part of a conference or association venue where someone else is paying to help promote you. I mean, the example I'd like to give is if you have 50 people coming to hear your talk, they're pre-qualified, they're interested in your subject. And imagine having to schedule 50 different business development meetings with those individuals. It would take forever, and you would pull your hair out. So all I'm saying is, rather than going through like a full-blown business planning or strategic planning, I would want to, depending on what your objectives are, if you're a small firm, you know, I don't know if it's to sustain your backlog and bring in more work, or I don't know whether it's to find a really important key mid-level person who could be a seller doer. Whatever your key objectives are, there are specific action items that are apropos for that you should focus on. I fear, for example, James and others, you know, if you were to go through the entire process, it just may be too daunting and unrealistic. So that's what else I would add to that. And I'm going to keep going. Just in the, by the way, we have a 1 o'clock hard stop. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So just, you know, this, I've either talked about this or you already know this. This is some of the importance of business planning. The most important thing is we don't want to be reactive at the mercy of market forces. We want to try and chart our path. You know, the more you plan, the better you can weather economic ups and downs. You know, it helps you prioritize your resources. You know, how are you going to invest your resources? What's going to have the highest ROI? And of course, getting your emerging leaders involved in business planning or somehow tapping them, that energizes them. And it sends them a strong message that they're keepers, that you value their expertise, et cetera. So what's really neat is, you know, business planning is not, it should not be siloed. It actually has so many impacts on, of course, marketing and BD, finance and accounting, hiring and retention, project management, delivery, and all these other areas. So a couple words of wisdom, you know, I get asked a lot, you know, about coming up with numerical goals for either your revenue or the size of the company. Firms use all different strategies for doing that. Some take last year's NSR, net service revenue, and they multiply it by 1.1 for a 10% growth. You know, my advice is, I just don't want you to get caught up too much in the actual numbers, because honestly, it's your plan and it's your actions, and whether you do what you say you're going to do, the numbers will follow. All right. Most people, clients will tell me, we don't want to grow just for growth's sake. We want to do strategic growth. You know, all of that is going to be a byproduct of a good business plan and also a good strategic plan. So don't get caught up too much in the numbers. Instead, bite off key action items, key things to do that will get you, to where you want to go, and everything else is going to follow. As far as who should be responsible for creation of the plan, I mean, this is typically depending on the size of your firm. I think this is a collaborative effort. At a minimum, it's typically the shareholders, the principals, although I will tell you that just because you're a principal and a shareholder, depending on the size of your firm, there should not be entitlement. Most firms have real difficulty with, sort of picking and choosing, but I advise my clients, look, not everyone is going to have a strategic contribution to a business plan just because you're a shareholder. In terms of the planning session, where we can't have too many people and we have to get things done, I advise you to be mindful about who actually is participating in that. As I mentioned earlier, typically the president and CEO is the PM, the project manager of the strategic plan, and the market sector leader or client leader or studio leader, whatever you call it, he or she is responsible for, they're like the PM of a specific client-focused business plan, whether it's for healthcare, higher ed, S&T, K through 12, commercial, federal, state, whatever the client sector is. How much time should be allocated? I know, Anne, that was a great question that you posed to me. I mean, the answer is it depends. In terms of like planning sessions, most firms will do a half day or a full day, but there's typically a lot of legwork that's done leading up to that session. And then I've already given you some idea of how you sort of revisit the plan on a regular basis. So it's hard for me to answer like how much time should be allocated. The answer is it depends, but I've given you a few kind of indicators. So let me just pause for a second. Ask me follow-up questions to this. Any follow-up questions from anyone?
There's a comment in the chat, is the important part is how you will go about meeting those numbers. I think when you were talking about the setting the goals and the numbers will follow.
Yes, so, and I'm sorry, hey, let me read it. Yeah, so Bill says, right, the important part is how you'll go about meeting those numbers. Yeah, I agree.
And from the business parent perspective, it's determining how, or articulating how you'll go about meeting those numbers.
Right. I mean, you're talking about the strategies and action items that support that,
yeah,
that support your goals. Any other questions or comments from anyone before I move on? Okay. So I want to pause for a second, and I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'm going to start sharing a brainstorming template. And, honestly, I don't really, can you see this Word document, I hope? So I don't care how we cover my contents or whether we cover all of it. This is fine to do this organically. I wanted to take a step back and ask you, what are your greatest either strategic planning or business planning challenges and pain points? Feel free to shout it out if you wish. What does your firm grapple with? What do you grapple with?
If you don't feel comfortable, you can send me a private message in the chat and I can read it for you. I can tell you I've heard from other people too, because I did a little bit of research beforehand, talking to different firms. And I think the who is a really important question, because without someone championing it, this tends to get pushed to the side when there are more pressing issues like a key person leaving your staff, or a marketing opportunity that can't be missed. Like it seems like without having one person responsible, it's challenging, and because it is you want it to be a collaborative process, but if it's not baked in, it's really difficult. If it's not somebody has to be the person on the hook,
That's right. That's right. And there's often even a committee as well helping support that person. But you're absolutely right, because we're a project type industry and most of our firms have been quite busy, it's very hard to get off the project treadmill. The problem is either because of economic factors or because you suddenly look at your firm's backlog and you have kind of a holy crap moment because you've been so busy focusing on doing the work. Now you need to refocus on, all right, well, you know, how are we going to grow? What are we going to do in terms of business development? And because of the gestation period that it takes, it's too late to do that. So I totally agree with you, Anne. Any other thoughts or questions from anyone?
I have another one. Completing our strategic plan in the first place. Are there good go-to strategic planners for startups?
Are there strategic planners for startups? You mean consultants, or what does that mean?
I think so, yeah. So if someone was starting their own firm and very small and wanted to do a strategic plan and needed outside help, I know that's something. Do you work with startups, or are there other?
Yeah, I mean,
how would you find someone? I guess is a good question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I work with I've worked with sole proprietors. I've worked with startups. And developing kind of more of a rudimentary plan. I don't know if I have, if I have other recommendations, to be honest with you. A lot of the other larger firms, like the firm that I used to work for, Zweig White, or the Zweig Group, they tend to work for larger firms. So I don't know, and I welcome if someone wants to put something in the chat as a recommendation. I'm all for that.
I know that we in the past have worked with our CPA around different, very specific ownership transition issues, things like that. And sometimes that's a good network to reach out to. And yeah, if other people have ideas for this group, that would be helpful too. Someone else, someone's typing, hold on a second, in the chat.
No, I can verbalize it.
Thank you.
So one of the things,
and who is this?
It's Bill Fleming.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Richard. So we've actually met before in a different BSA event, I believe. I appreciate you doing this. One of the things that I've seen is that firms will they'll go through the process of doing a business plan, which I believe this is part of what you're hoping to do with us. So they'll go through the process of doing a business plan, but one of the challenges that they have is that after they do it, it just kind of collects dust and it's never referred back. Even if it's like semi-monthly or semi-annually or monthly. What are some tools that people can use to help measure plan versus actual, or just advice in general?
Well, I mean, on the accountability piece, if you've developed robust action items and goals that are smart, the best way for accountability, I mean, I kind of have a 2 strikes rule, and that is that, basically you get 1 mulligan, as in not doing your action item. You get 1 more chance to do it. After the second chance, then it's reassigned. And the other thing I want to say is that I am a big advocate of specific goals that individuals have, that they're obviously woven into their overall performance and HR goals, so that they're coalesced and that they're revisited along with all those other goals. So this is not like rocket science. I do think when you have specific people with specific goals and action items, the way to hold them accountable, add them to their overall goals. And if you have a strong PM of the business plan, for example, or of a strategic plan, when you do these check-in meetings and you're assessing the progress, you literally go around and you find out whether they've been done, and if they haven't, what's the impediment, do they need to be reassigned, etc. So it's very similar to how you would hold people in general accountable. for, let's say, things that are goals or action items that aren't part of a strategic plan or a business plan. So look, folks, I don't advocate a lot of fancy stuff here. The main thing is the point person for the business plan and the strategic plan, and having a really good set of robust action items and goals, and then holding people accountable. The holding people accountable piece, that, I think you know this, I mean, this stems from the top down, and it really is, you know, it's embodiment of the type of culture that you want to have. You know, are you a culture that takes these plans seriously and, you know, realizes that they're a key essential part of growing and developing your firm, making your firm better in whatever ways you want? That's going to come from the top down, and then that's going to be instilled in people. So I will tell you that in firms that I've worked with that really struggle with the accountability, the issue has been from the top down. So that's all I would add. Does anyone else have any other specific challenges or pain points that they want me to get up here and I can address? Anyone else? Okay, so feel free to let me know. I'm going to stop sharing that, and then I want to go back to my
Hey,
PowerPoint.
Richard, I'm sorry. I was.
Who is this?
This is Gerard, sorry.
Yeah.
I was in the process of asking a question. I realized I was on mute.
Okay.
Sorry, rookie mistake. Just one quick, if you could touch on this point, is clarity in the decision-making process as the strategic or business plan evolves, which I believe it ultimately will evolve over time. And then how do you mitigate the differences in perspectives as the evolution occurs?
Okay, can you just elaborate? What do you mean clarity in the decision making?
So if the business or strategic plan is something that gets reviewed at certain intervals, there may be inside or outside forces that create an inflection on the direction of that business or strategic plan. What strategies have you employed or used to provide clarity in making decisions on the direction to move forward?
Well, so that's a good question. The way I would respond is that I'm, you know, part of my assumption here in terms of the efficacy of strategic planning or business planning is that you have that frankly, you have an organization of people who are in touch with your clients on a regular basis and are constantly gathering data points that may impact or influence the strategic plan or the business plan. So, you know, on the marketing and BD side, one of the things I train on and consult on a lot is developing a firm-wide business development culture. And when firms have, you know, are working to strive to develop that, they are going to be, frankly, in touch more with their clients and prospects and have continual data points that may inform the strategic plan and the business plan. So this is a cultural thing because otherwise, how else are you going to sort of know how to course correct unless you're constantly gathering sort of data from externally from your clients and to some extent internally. So Gerard, what the second part of your question, I'm not sure, I can't remember what was the second part.
Yeah, mitigating differences in perspective. So if you have senior level strategy team members who have differences of opinion or direction, what methodologies should we consider to create an alignment or decision-making process to mitigate those differences?
Well, I mean, you know, short of sometimes getting help from a consultant,
yeah.
I mean, we're talking about consensus building here. So right. I don't, I'm not sure, you know, what your culture is like or how you do that, but it's sort of the old-fashioned way of sharing opinions and data points, and then as a group collectively, you know, determining what you want to do. I mean, but ultimately, there is some accountability. Like if we're talking about a client-centric business plan, it's up to the client or market sector leader. Ultimately, if we're talking about a strategic plan, you know, the ultimate PM is the president and CEO. So that's where the accountability falls. But as far as how you go about your consensus building and decision making, I'm sorry, that's like such a customized response depending on your firm and your culture that it's hard for me to think about like a more generic response. So that's the best I got right now, given the time. If you want to follow up with me afterwards, I'm happy if you want to do that. I want to make sure that we have time to walk through this planning template that I created. So let me find it, bear with me. And if you follow up with me afterwards, I'm happy to share this with you. But I created this. This is like a quick and dirty kind of business planning template. And I'm not going to go through every line item here, but let me back up and say to you that I am a firm advocate of kind of keep it simple, and that if you fill in and answer the responses to all of these different areas, it's going to generate for you like a 4 to 6 page business plan. I'm not a big fan of plans that are really long and detailed, but just sit on the shelf. So, this template kind of enables you to answer and address for a particular client sector to go through all these different questions and areas that I've asked. So you can see that the top part has a bunch of questions ranging from your target geography to your target facility types, funding mechanisms, what's keeping your target audience up at night in that client sector. You can go through all these. And then at the bottom, I have an action plan. So this is really where the rubber hits the road. And I decided, just for the purposes of example, I included a couple of sample action items, like develop a list of top target clients and prospective clients. That's something I firmly believe, that every firm in a business plan should have a sense of what are their key, whether it's like the 80-20 rule, what are your key clients and prospective clients? What do you need to do to grow, whether it's strategic hires or market positioning, et cetera. So by doing the analytical piece up top and then developing the action items, which include responsible parties and due dates, it's sort of like voila, you have a business plan. And you can see at the top here where I have vision for the client sector. For example, 3-year and 5-year. I gave you, for example, some sample internal parameters like culture, leadership, governance, et cetera, and then some market-facing objectives in terms of your vision. Whether it's geographic presence or service or project focus or competitive position, et cetera. So I encourage you to feel free to use this if you want and take a stab at it. This has been honed and developed over a couple decades, so it's pretty comprehensive. Like, in my opinion, it has all of the key things that I think you need to address. So, James, I see that you're back. I hope your daughter's doing well. If I'm in your shoes and you have not used or developed a template like this and tried to complete it, that's something where I would start. There are firms here that are of all different sizes. There are firms that are several hundred and they're more sophisticated, and they likely already have a business plan for their target markets that may address some of these components. So any questions at all about this template? I'm trying to think, all right, well, where can I add value? And one of the things I get asked the most is, Rich, do you have a quick and dirty template? So I thought I would share that with you. So any questions about this template from anyone? Anything confusing?
Well, I do. I mean, thank you for bearing with me while I went to talk to my daughter. She's working as a teacher in France this year, and so she's trying to find housing, and it's a little, But one thing that I'm not seeing here, and maybe it's not really. This looks a little bit more like a business plan in terms of, what I think of. Like we've tried to do this in the past, this type of checklist and fill out these types of questions. And we've called it a marketing plan, not a business plan. And like what I'm missing or not seeing here is what I'm thinking of as a business plan, which is kind of the how to make more money plan. I don't see, I see how this.
Are you talking about, James, how to be more profitable?
Yes, because that's really, for us, that's when you're so small the way we are, and you tend to focus on things like, doing a good job on the project, you tend to burn tons of hours and, not spend, and basically, as anybody who's run or tried to have a small independent practice knows, you spend endless hours trying to get the details right and stuff like that, and you lose sight of the client's budget, so then you don't really end up, their budget for professional
Right.
fees.
So
then you don't really get the money that you should be getting, and it becomes difficult with the clients. And
right. James, I want to interrupt you just because we have so little time. I want to make sure to get to my slides and also just make sure we address, everyone's sort of challenges. You're right. You're right. This template is not a specific template to address how to increase your profitability. That's a completely different question. I mean, some of the things here are definitely going to impact that, but it's a different set of questions. It's a different set of game plan that would get at, it gets at project budgets, it gets at project delivery. It's a completely different kind of set of questions if I were to focus on profitability. So I want to acknowledge that, but it's a little bit of a specific need that's different from the overall topic of this. I will tell you that the more focused you are and the better responses you have to these questions, it's certainly going to positively impact your profitability. But if I'm consulting with the firm, I need to find out what are their issues around profitability. As a consultant, I have no idea whether it starts in the business development process where you have underscoped it or underbid it, or whether it's an issue with QA, QC, or project management and delivery. So kind of a little bit broad for me to address. Any questions at all about the template?
There are 2 questions in the chat. Do you have anything that can help financial planning on your template? And then someone else said, I don't see much financial modeling here, or am I missing that? When I look at your plan, I see the financial benchmarks, the 3-year history and the goals. Typically that is where the KPIs are for net revenue, for profit, for what your multiplier is. If any of these terms don't make sense to you, I'm going to give a quick plug for our December meeting when we are going to review a survey that DGC, which is a local CPA firm, does, where they review all of these kinds of financial targets. And we dig a little bit deeper into how you calculate them and where you find them, if that helps.
And I would even say, even on the marketing and BD front, things like percent of revenue from past clients versus new clients, and your shortlist rate and your win rate, and the percentage of NSR that you spend on marketing and business development. I could throw in here a whole slew of financial kind of metrics or benchmarks that would be important holistically. So I just gave like a few examples of this. So I recognize this doesn't go deep in terms of like financial financial modeling or financial metrics. But you know, I guess in closing, one thing I would say, depending on the result of this plan or whether it's a strategic plan, you know, what, as you all know, that which doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So you're going to need to come up with your own kind of wish list of the key metrics that you need to track that are going to support whatever you need to focus on and accomplish. Like, what are your priorities? And then therefore develop the commensurate metrics in order to support that. So this is kind of a broader kind of my presentation, a broader sort of survey course on business planning and strategic planning. So I recognize it doesn't go too deep into the financial piece. Let me stop sharing this and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, if that's okay. And let me, and others, just, I see it's 12:55. These are really good questions. I'm going to sort of skim through my last slides because I want to see what I think is most important to cover, if that's okay. So bear with me. So you all, has anyone not heard of a SWOT analysis? I assume most of you, have you heard of a SWOT analysis? Let me know otherwise. So this is and you know, I have defined it here, what the SWOT stands for, and it's an important exercise to tackle before doing the templates. So whether you can do a SWOT analysis of a particular market. You can also do a SWOT analysis that's more general, that's part of your strategic plan. So I've included the elements here. On this slide, you know, the key things, I've already covered some of the key things here, which is the 80-20 rule. The biggest mistake that I see among my clients, be they engineers or architects, is not getting the way business works and not understanding the 80-20 rule. And it's more important to actually finish the plan and get it out there rather than making it perfect. The other thing that I've seen bog down the process is an over-reliance on consensus. After all, we're architects and architecture firms, we're very consensus driven. And you know, this unfortunately is the undoing of many a business plan because we're too focused on the consensus, but it's a fine balance, folks. So I'm not eschewing the consensus building, but at some point, you know, there's a responsible party and we need to adhere to the 80-20 rule. So I wanted to mention that. I mentioned here already the importance of gathering internal and external data to help inform your business plan and your strategic plan. So I've mentioned that. Some other key parts here as far as ensuring a successful outcome. Yeah, I mean, this all makes sense to you. We've talked about when to revisit the plan. The buy-in and excitement of the leadership team and the staff is obviously critical. We talked about who is the project manager, so I don't need to go through that. The action plan, remember my template, the last part of that template, honestly, that's the most important part. It's what are you going to do? I think we all can be experts at doing the analysis, and there's no end to the analysis. But what's critical, if you're really wanting to achieve your objectives, it's the action plan. So I have a really big focus on maximizing ROI. So, you know, since I do executive search, I know of, you know, I focus on key things to maximize ROI in that area. Same thing with marketing and business development and other areas. So we don't have enough time to have a group discussion on high ROI activities. But I mentioned on the marketing and BD front, I already mentioned a couple, like presenting and being on a committee to client-facing groups, not doing cold calls, not doing advertising. Those are low ROI activities. So this is kind of a little bit of what I mean by that. And a lot of the activities that I think of as high ROI on the marketing and BD front, you can cross out the word marketing and BD, and you could put recruiting and retention, because a lot of these are all built, they're all aimed at enhancing your name recognition, and positioning your firm as an expert in your target markets. We talked about that. Oh, I would be crazy if I didn't mention this. So, and I added this slide in late because I don't know if you all are aware of this, but the state has its workforce training fund. There's the general fund and there's the express fund. With the general fund, you can submit a grant application and get upwards, depending on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to teach and how many people you have, you can get upwards of $250,000 from the state. And so I've worked personally with 16 firms, architecture firms in the area, to help develop these grant proposals and garner money. I've done this for Sasaki, for Goody Clancy, for Ellenzweig, for Dyer Brown, for numerous firms. And this, folks, if you haven't done this, you need to look into this because it is not difficult to do. Why is it germane to this topic? Because I have gotten funding for business planning for firms in the grant proposal, also marketing and BD stuff, sustainability training, BIM training, all of that. So if you want more information, feel free to reach out and I can let you know. So, and this was great. This is tough in like 55 minutes to cover everything. So if you all have any questions, let me know. And I would also encourage you to go to my website and you can Google my Friedman file, which comes out every quarter. And you can look up topics that may interest you on a wide variety of topics. So, Anne, anything else?
No, thank you so much. I know this was a lot to tackle in an hour. We were being very ambitious. I think it's a conversation we all need to have within our firms, and it's helpful to have people around us who focus on the same areas. And so I just want to put a plug in for the BSA. This group meets monthly. Our next meeting is going to be November 1st at noon. It's a week earlier than usual. But yes, we'll have an opportunity to sort of debrief a little bit about this. And also we had some questions at our last meeting about 401ks and how they're administered. So we're going to tackle that subject then. I'm now going to stop recording. And if anyone